Let's do the letters page. We're going to look at the letters page for Tales of the Legion 317.
Hit the bell.
Legion Outpost is what this one's called. Well, where the hell is it? There's too much extra junk in this issue. It's right here.
Someone's going to complain that we didn't go over the Battle Force 2000.
Let them complain. That's all I'm saying. First letter's from Michael Grabaway. He's a longtime Legion fan. I remember this guy from online stuff 20 years ago. But he's writing this letter on the occasion of Legion 312. He writes a whole long letter about how he's been a fan since he was in second grade, and now he's about to graduate from high school. So a decade of Legion fandom. That's about all that is. He just says how great it's been and how he hopes they'll publish his letter as a gift for him. But he's still out there. He's got a website, michaelgrabaway.com. He's like a rocket scientist. Or he was. He might be retired by now.
Wow. Did you check into that recently?
Yeah, today. I followed him on Twitter.
Dang.
His Twitter account is like, he has that app where you can log the beer you drink. And it puts like, you get a badge if you drink certain ones or something. And that's almost all his tweets are, where it automatically generates from some app of beer drinking.
Wow. Didn't know that was a thing.
One other guy I follow on Twitter who does that. Or like on a Saturday, you'll see 4 posts of his where it's like, I'm drinking a such and such wheat ale or whatever, you know?
Does it say how many?
I don't think so.
Like it. They don't tweet it's like a drinking log.
I think if you try different brands or something,
Mm-hmm.
I don't totally know the purpose of it, but I think it's like when you check in at a restaurant and they have those apps that do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same thing, but for beer guys.
Mm-hmm.
Paul's response is to congratulate him on his graduation. And I guess in issue 312, which is what this letters page is responding to, they made the big announcement that the Legion is going to become two comics, a new Legion #1 Baxter, and then continue the old numbering into Tales of the Legion. And that was the big news.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess maybe that is what caused Michael Grabaway to write this letter upon that milestone of the new series coming out.
So are people writing letters to the separate magazines at this point, or do they all go to one magazine and they just, I guess they're referring to specific issues most of the time, right?
Yeah, usually the letters are just referring back to whatever 2 months ago or 3 months ago or something.
Do they have like separate addresses you write to? I mean, how do they keep them straight?
I bet they don't. I bet they all go to like at the end of this, Paul says, he says the address for letters is at the top of this page.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's just 666 Fifth Avenue,
Right.
which is the DC address. So I think you just write to Legion Outpost, and both comics are doing Legion Outpost.
Oh, it's called Outpost on both. And they just sort of divvy them up. Like if it specifically refers to a Tales story, they'll put it in the Tales column.
Yeah, it must be that way. And I mean, At this point, we're still early enough in the Tales.
Right. They're still referring to the previous series, pre-Tales,
right.
Before that was even an issue. One final letter question. They keep getting letters for the reprint issues?
I'm pretty sure they have unique new letters pages in the...
like right up to the end?
I think so. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think they do. I think they keep publishing a letters page, and I don't think they're reprinting the letters pages. They could be.
We'll need to check into that. That's important.
Very important to the history of Legion fandom.
Well, what happens when we get to an issue? Have we done any of the early Baxter issues that have been republished?
We haven't done any yet.
We might have to go through 2 letter columns.
Yep, I'll have to pull them out. We'll definitely be doing highlights instead of complete letter columns.
Stay tuned.
Paul goes on to, he introduces Mindy Newell in response to Michael Grabaway's letter.
Is this her debut?
Well, he says she made her writing debut in New Talent Showcase and our Meanwhile column. Was she ghostwriting the Meanwhile column for Dick Giordano or something?
New Talent Showcase is also where the artist started.
Oh, is Shoemaker from there? I know McGuire came from that, I think.
Shoemaker did. I don't think they did the same issue, but they may have. That would be crazy, right?
Yeah, it would. I've only ever looked at like one issue of New Talent Showcase. And the one I got was by people who I don't think was new talent. I got it because who was the artist? It was one of those guys who kind of turned into like Neil Adams light in the 80s, like Tom Greinberg or somebody. But it was inked by Craig Flessel,
Mm-hmm.
who was like, he drew the cover for like Detective Comics #1. This real long, he lived to be 100 and some, long career cartoonist.
Whoa.
But he had this kind of crusty ink line. But he was inking this guy who I only knew to be one of these like fine line Neil Adams types.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I got it. It's kind of an interesting look to that artwork. That's the only issue of New Talent Showcase I've ever looked at.
I think I've browsed all of them online. Did Jurgens? I think maybe Jurgens started there too.
Could be.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
The next letter is from C.A. Providence from Columbia, Maryland. This person writes, they've got 3 questions. The one I highlighted was question number 2, where they demand that Paul bring back Tyrock. He was an interesting character with an interesting power. Why waste him? If you can bring back Invisible Kid back from the dead, then you should certainly bring Tyrock back. Or is having more than one black character in the Legion a no-no?
Damn.
Another letter writer accusing Paul Levitz of being prejudiced.
Snap.
Yep. And Paul responds, he says, we confess to never having thought Tyrock was an interesting character or possessed of an interesting power. Sound powers are very hard to portray in a soundless medium. Tyrock has, it's kind of like Black Canary. But then I think they also amped it up so he could traverse dimensions or something with that vibration power.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe some of this is retroactive, but I thought his powers were like Banshee from the X-Men's, which are pretty versatile.
I thought that was Black Canary. I thought you just had a loud scream.
It is, but Banshee notably can fly also. Like he uses the scream. Not that it makes any sense. Like it's somehow propelling him off the ground. He could fly as well as use his scream to knock people over, smash walls open, stuff like that. Like it doesn't seem limiting at all in that book.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the power to manipulate sound waves and take that another step, and you have some frequency control, like you can do FM radio or whatever, and talk to people through a mountain and stuff.
Right. Super ventriloquism.
Yeah. Paul says, however, we are always open to reader clamor. And no, there's no particular barrier to 2 black legionnaires. It simply never worked out that way so far. They did eventually, those 2 guys, Tyrock, Invisible Kid 2, were like working together in the 5 years later.
Right.
Still not as active legionnaires, though.
Yeah, and didn't they both end up president of the Earth?
Yep. First Invisible Kid was a president, and he quit, and so Tyrock became president of Earth.
Right.
And he still never became a legionnaire again.
Pre-Zero Hour.
That's right.
Yeah, I think Levitz maybe took some of this stuff to heart decades later because...
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, he did bring him back.
I think he used him quite a... They made an effort to work with him a lot more, and they gave him a snazzier costume.
Yeah, he was in, now that you mention it, he was in that Legion Lost second series.
Right. He had kind of goggles that he wore on the top of his head. He had long pants, but the costume was still somewhat reminiscent of his original.
This next letter, do you read this next one? From Jeff. No address given.
Oh boy. Here we go.
He says, Dear Paul and Keith, especially Keith. Sometimes I wonder if Picasso painted the way he did because that was how he felt, or because he wasn't capable of realism.
This guy's stupid.
Yeah. I find it hard to believe that the person who drew LSH 287 through 304 is the same person who's working on the LSH now. Keith, your art used to be fantastic. Now it's your art which is driving me away. He goes on to say, I believe that realism is the best style an artist could cultivate. I'm a bit of an artist myself, and I wish I could draw the way you used to. He goes on, he's talking about the way Keith draws the characters, or how he used to draw them and they were good. And he hates...
That's such a cold, compliment / put down at the same time. It's great. I wish I could draw the way you used to.
Like, you've heard people like this, right? Who are like,
right.
I'm a bit of an artist myself.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I used to think I could never be as good as you. But now you've changed and you're terrible. Like,
right.
Like, you don't know anything. You're an idiot. He makes a point to say that he hates Wildfire's new costume. And then he starts really laying in to the way Keith has drawn issues
right.
311 and 312. This is the Omen Prophet era. 312 is just kind of a regular issue. I don't know. There's nothing too much happening in it. He says, but now in 311 and 312, the characters look like something straight out of the Sunday Funnies. I thought DC was trying to take the comic out of comic books.
Jesus.
You've started to draw the characters goofy-eyed with flabby Tom Selleckoid faces, distorted mouths, and the stupidest, bulbous noses I've seen since the Muppets. He says in 312, page 6, panel 4, that's not supposed to be Element, lad, is it? Also, now he's talking to Paul.
Oh. Well, this might be deserved.
It kind of is. It's kind of still a Keith, though, I think. He says also, wake up, Paul, here's where you come in. I used to notice a sense of logical progression from frame to frame that seems to be missing now. Before, every character always did exactly the right thing for that character at that time without ever becoming predictable. Now there are sudden, inexplicable changes in facial expression and attitude. Not only that, but sometimes the character's lines do not match his expression or the temper of the situation. That's also Keith. Just winging it, I guess, doing the breakdown or doing his interpretation of the script. I don't know. This guy Jeff, he sucks. No wonder he wouldn't give his address.
I don't know. I think it's funny how he tries to walk it back at the end. It's like, thanks for hearing me out. Please take my comments into consideration. Like, after throwing the gauntlet down and saying all this nasty stuff, he's like, nothing personal or something at the end. Like, he tries to make
well, he says, I wouldn't waste a stamp if I didn't care about the book.
Right.
I don't know. He just seems like he's up his own ass about this. Like, we love the way the artwork looks now. In fact, this issue 312, it's Giffen and Kesel. It's some of the best looking Legion artwork, in my opinion. And this guy is like, it looks like the Sunday Funnies. They suck.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's literally saying your comic book looks like a comic book. Mm-hmm. You know.
Well, he doesn't like cartooning at all.
Right.
He thinks realism is the best thing you could attain.
Right.
Give me a break.
Which, I heard plenty of that. I don't know that people think like that now. Maybe they're a little more enlightened. But certainly when we were teenagers, we would complain about something looking too cartoony and not realistic enough. And then, but obviously, what is realism? Is Neil Adams really realistic?
Right.
Not really. I mean, it's not necessarily any more realistic than one of these guys, like the newspaper comics. In fact, it doesn't really represent life. Nobody walks around with gigantic muscles like that, or can't see their ass and chest at the same time in the same frame. And
I don't think of the Giffen artwork even that's from early in his run as that realistic. It's kind of realistic, but it still looks like a superhero comic book.
Right.
It's not good cartooning exactly. It's good drawing. This guy just wants superhero illustration. He doesn't want the kind of...
Right.
Yeah, Giffen has become stylized. But I think his panel layout, like this stuff where this clown is saying that There's inexplicable facial changes, and I don't know what. Giffen is just doing. You could call it experimental, but I think it's just cartooning. It's just he's doing.
I feel like I don't know, like maybe because I've read so much of his stuff out of order, and it just all kind of blends together. It's like a mishmash of different styles that he seems to come and go, use and not use. But like I don't feel like there's any like really noticeable break to me until maybe he gets to Trencher. Like maybe some stuff looks a little more refined. Maybe some stuff has more splotches and dirt on it. I mean, I guess the McGuire stuff stands out quite a bit from the other stuff, but I just don't think the difference. I don't remember his art like radically changing that much from, say, Great Darkness Saga until the McGuire stuff. The McGuire stuff does look dramatically different, I guess, but maybe it looks more polished to me, but I don't see it like all of a sudden, whoa, you're drawing like shit now.
I think there is a drastic change between.
Okay.
Like he leads up to it. He's kind of working up to it at the tail end of the Legion of Superheroes series before the Baxter Legion of Superheroes story. That the stuff he did in the first couple issues of Baxter that he worked on, very cartoony, very different, and I think you could see it kind of progressing in that direction,
right?
In like these ones, this dude's complaining about like 3, 3, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's really different, and it's the storytelling. Like it's much more traditional back in Great Darkness Saga. And then he starts doing the thing where he'll like the page will only have like 3 panels on it, and they kind of overlap each other, and there's a bunch of white space,
right?
Things like that. Like that's sort of, they say experimental. It's just not traditional. It's not like every other fucking 9 panels of boxes, like a Kirby comic or a George Perez comic. Like this guy, he wants George Perez. He wants Neil Adams. He wants a lot of little lines to show all the muscles and stuff. But yeah, he's just not willing to roll with it. And he thinks no one else is either. That's why he's writing, to let Paul know that whatever he and the people he identifies as the real fans aren't.
But the stylistic change he's complaining about, that's when he kind of becomes Keith Giffen as we know him, right? Like he starts having the distinct, like his stuff is more non-distinct earlier on. It looks like a lot like 5 or 6 other popular 70s artists, right? Because now that you describe that, I remember like when he, at least I did notice, like when he first jumped on, I would not immediately guess it was Keith Giffen. It has a sort of Perez Byrne-ish.
Yeah, in fact, it's even hard to distinguish it from like the Pat Broderick stuff that was right before him in Legion. But yeah, he has that kind of clean, I don't know, delineated look. Like Starlin. George Perez, like he just got on the bandwagon with those guys because he could draw that way, you know?
Right.
I don't know, like a lot of people, he's trying something new, trying to do something else. And there are people who won't go with it. They think he's wrong for wanting to do something else or to be himself. The stuff that's showing up in the 300s and 3 teens of Legion, that's the stuff I like. Or the beginnings of the stuff that I really like.
Yeah, I just saw somebody on a Legion-related Facebook page posted some stuff from issue 50, and there was a long trail of people commenting about, like, this is when Giffen went to shit, or whatever. And I was really surprised, because I think that stuff looks really, really good. Maybe better than a lot of the stuff he'd been doing up until then, but I guess every time he changes, there's a ton of people were up in arms. They missed the previous style. So these people were complaining about the style that this guy hates, they loved, and they hate seeing it go.
I also miss that Giffen that can't draw like this now.
Right.
But he's also an individual, you know, and he's allowed to do whatever he wants. And I'm
Yeah.
kind of on board, like I like that early Legion stuff he did. I like
Uh-huh.
the issue 312, I think looks really good. I
Mm-hmm.
think issue 50 looks really good.
Mm-hmm.
I like Trencher. It's
Mm-hmm.
not my favorite, but I like
Mm-hmm.
it. It would have kind of be crazy if he drew some Legion like that. I mean, he drew like 2 pages like that, but
Yeah.
uh, I'm not going to be like, I hate this guy. He ruined my favorite comic. People need to get over it.
Yeah. I mean, having read several people complaining about his various art changes, including this one, part of me just keeps thinking, well, wait till you guys see like Inferior 5. But like all of this stuff seems a lot better than his more recent work. But to be fair, the man is like in his 70s, and he's doing what he wants, like you said.
I think I would like him less if he was somebody who was like, oh, this letter has convinced me I better just do
Right,
what I always have done and never
right,
change.
right.
But also this other paragraph where he's talking to Paul, those are comments for Keith in the storytelling department, because that changed too. The stuff he started doing with panel layouts and with pacing and storytelling, that's Giffen doing that too. And like it's good. Like those are more interesting, more sophisticated ways of telling a comic book story. This guy is saying he thought DC is trying to take the comic out of comic books, but that's not true. DC's trying to say the comics aren't for kids anymore. And these more sophisticated Giffen comics, they're not for children. They're not child's reading. And maybe Jeff just wants childish things.
Yeah. This guy's going to come after us.
I don't know his address. He didn't give it. He doesn't know my address either.
Right.
He may have passed on by now.
What if it's like Jeff Darrow?
Damn. Now, Jeff Darrow is a guy whose art style has not changed in my whole life.
Damn.
I mean, it's always been good.
Yeah. It's obviously it's not him. Jeff Darrow is actually a very nice guy.
Nice and thoughtful person.
Right. Considerate. I wouldn't imagine him writing the Screed.
This is 1984. How long ago is that? 40 years ago.
Would have been old enough to, I guess, but I think he would have been too old to write a letter like this.
Yeah. Yeah, he could have been a kid, I suppose. We can just never know.
I think he was probably reading European comics, not the Legion.
Paul doesn't really give a very good defense of Keith, only just to say Keith's choices in recent months have been a deliberate experimentation, attempting to stretch his abilities by moving in new directions.
Mm-hmm.
He says that's a reasonable restlessness. And if you want to make artistic comparisons of the order of Picasso, maybe a fairer one is to the different periods Picasso moved through. Like Picasso had the blue period, etc.
Right.
I don't know the other periods he had, the red one, the spaghetti one.
Mm-hmm. I think there's there's also a fair amount of evidence that he was more than capable of drawing realistically also. So it seems weird that he picked this example. Like,
yeah, I mean, Picasso is a very famous, well-known person in the fine art world, and that's why he chose Picasso as an example. He doesn't know anything else.
Right. I think Paul makes a good point here too about the comparison being inaccurate because you're comparing fine art to commercial art, which comics are. At least this kind of comic is. That, I mean, maybe some people would contest that, like, and they prefer their comics to be more artistic. But I always think that's a little strange when people make those arguments about Marvel and DC comics, because they've got deadlines and they're working with other people's properties, so it seems unrealistic.
That logic supports what Jeff says, that if it's a commercial product, it shouldn't change, and it shouldn't change drastically like Giffen did.
Okay, I can see that. It wasn't quite what I was saying, but yeah. Or that he should be like he's complaining like I don't like this new logo or new branding you're using, switch it back, Keith. Go back to drawing the way you were before. Which, okay, yeah, maybe it is. Maybe the fine art does creep in a little there, because you can't realistically expect him just to like devolve. I don't know. I guess maybe he has before. He did switch out of the trencher style.
Yeah, I do wonder if that was a choice based in the marketplace or something, you know?
I I tend to think it isn't, but I don't know for sure. But I do know, at least for a while, Trencher was very popular, a lot more popular than anything else he had produced in that time as an artist.
I assume it was because it was seen by way more people, right?
Right. Yeah, I knew a lot of art students and kids who really liked that comic and were unaware of anything else he'd ever done. And I like that style a lot too, but when he did switch back, I was a little relieved. Like I didn't realize how much I missed his other style. But I never thought it was like a one or the other thing. Like maybe it would just depend on the project. He could go back and forth.
Yeah, I think I feel that way too. Like,
Right.
yeah, it seemed like that's how Trencher was drawn
Right.
at that
And
time, and
Lobo.
I didn't feel like that was a permanent or the only thing he would ever do, especially after
Right.
seeing that he was kind of a chameleon in a way.
Right. I mean, there are comics that he does where that feels very appropriate, but then maybe some narratives that convolutes or distracts, like he needs more concise drawings for.
But he never really did get back to the look of just prior to Trencher. It looked a little bit like that, but not quite. And maybe it's because,
You don't think Victory isn't in the same range as Legion Heckler stuff?
yeah, but didn't that come out before Trencher? I guess not. It
Victory?
came out about the same
No,
time. It came out in like
no.
95, right?
I don't remember what year, but it was after Trencher. Maybe it was only a few months,
Yeah, I think it was
or
maybe right
maybe.
at the tail end of Trencher. But see, I'm thinking of the stuff in like the Supreme annual, and then
Oh
after
yeah.
that, like he started having it's the inker was making the difference, I think, and he kind of, I don't know, maybe got a little looser in the pencils or something. It
Uh-huh.
always looks a little more scratchier and sketchier
Right.
than like the slicker, more I guess elegant inking style that Gordon had, or that Jimmy Palmiotti did on Victory.
Right. Right.
Like he started using I think Steve Mitchell inked on Heckler, and that looked a
Mhm.
little bit more ragged than Legion. And
Mhm.
then Claude Saint Aubin, I don't know how to say his name.
Mhm.
He did that little bit of stuff Giffen did for like Mars Attacks and some of that stuff, and that's also a little bit more rough around the edges looking to me.
I don't know if I know that stuff,
He
but
did.
yeah.
Giffen wrote. I don't know how much of it he did. I think he did like a Mars Attacks #1, and there was like a main story that was, I think it was breakdowns by Giffen, and then
Hmm.
finished art by Charlie Adlard. But then they
Okay.
had like a backup story that was Giffen and Saint Aubin, and then I think that guy did a bunch of his stuff. Like he might have done the punks stuff.
I totally forgot about that book.
Easy to forget about. I mean, it's like, I don't know. Nobody talks about it.
That was like it was like Valiant, right? Is that the one like it got canceled, but he actually drew a couple more issues and they just it was just
No,
kind of floating around?
that's Victory.
Okay.
Victory had one issue come out, and I think he maybe completed two and a half of them or something.
Right. It also seems I don't know, and I'm probably reading into things because I don't know enough about his life, but like that fire was gone or something. Like whatever was pushing him to keep reinventing himself. Maybe he was getting to the age where he didn't feel like he had to prove anything anymore. Like he'd gotten a little more complacent. Maybe I feel like John Byrne did the same thing around that time.
There was that period when Giffen stopped doing comics and started doing storyboards.
Right. Right. He did it for Dennis Cohen.
Oh, was he on Justice League?
No, Dennis Cohen. I was at that con with both of them, and I was talking to Dennis Cohen about Giffen, like how I kept going. He goes, "Where do you keep going?" I'm going to go talk to Keith Giffen again, and that's when he said, "Oh yeah, I got him a job years ago. We used to work together." Tell him this. They had like some inside joke. He had a like Static from Milestone had a cartoon.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know what his role in it was, but he was able to hire Giffen in as a storyboard artist there.
Oh, I didn't know he worked on that. I only knew that he worked on Ed, and Eddie, like doing a couple episodes of that.
That's so weird because now that you say that, I could kind of, I'm imagining it, I'm sure, but that kind of seems Giffen-y in a way to me.
But I can see him doing both of those really easily. But what I know from doing like animation work is that when you start doing storyboards, like just because of the deadline, the way you draw gets really distilled down.
Right.
And like I think a lot of storyboard people, like they become unable to like do that good finish line work because all they do is like do a circle for a head and a stick body and on, and it's real basic. I mean, like the superhero ones, they're different, a little bit different than like Loud House or like Ed, and Eddie probably is.
Right.
But you begin to leave out a lot. I think Giffen already left out a lot.
Right.
In his like breakdowns.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, if you're talking about storyboards, they're kind of like breakdowns a lot of times, at least the ones I think you're describing, right? Like they're not fleshing, they're drawing like mannequin guys sometimes for placement.
Right.
No?
Like you don't have to draw on model. You don't have to draw super tight usually.
Right.
It can be real sketchy. So his like those when you see the Giffen mini comic breakdown of something,
right?
Like there's a couple of those floating around that we've seen.
Right.
That's probably about the level of polish you use on a storyboard.
Right.
But he may have even had to go a step farther than that as far as paring down what you put in it. I don't know. I don't do storyboards. I've done like one, you know. But I think that once you just start busting those out, like the way you do your drawing changes from what you used to do.
Yeah. That's interesting.
That could account for the way he kind of draws now or the last 15, 20 years.
I mean, what you're describing is what at least I think is where the entire cartooning style came from to begin with. Like guys doing those dailies, you know, having to grind that stuff out so fast, having to pare the stuff down. Like, you know, like in the early 20th century, like, you know, all that Prince Valiant stuff had to go, like for a lot of them, you know, it just started paring down because they had to they had another one due tomorrow, you know?
Right. Well, yeah, the Prince Valiant stuff, that was a weekly. That only came out
Right.
But yeah, those ones that came out on every day, yeah, those are drawn super fast. And they kind of looked at, they had this, you could tell they were drawn fast. Economy is maybe the word I was thinking.
Economy, yeah.
Yeah, this is what Ivan told us in the class.
Yeah, didn't he have like some exercise where you to draw the same thing faster and faster and faster?
Right. Yeah, there was that exercise where you draw a castle in 30 seconds, in 1 minute, in 5 minutes, or something like that.
It gets more like gestural.
Right. Like, and which one looks more like a cartoon? The one you drew in 30 seconds. Right. But he also would talk about how like those, like the designs of those old comic strip characters, like every part of like what made up of the character could be drawn in one stroke. The nose is just a loop. The little line that goes from the top of your forehead, the arch of your forehead to the top of your nose, that's one stroke. Right. The eyeball is like a dot, you know?
Right. That's almost like letter making in a way. Like,
Yeah, exactly. You do this like just whip it out. It's like
Mm-hmm.
these 6 marks
Right.
add up to Dagwood.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what Giffen was getting to in
Mm-hmm.
issue 312. And I think he's has become a much purer cartoonist as time has gone on. Except now he kind of, for a while, he was drawing just like, this is a Jack Kirby drawing. He
Right.
went
Right.
back to that, and that's fine. Those are kind of cool looking, like the Hordak comic.
I think I have Ivan's phone number around here. Maybe should we ask him to be on the show? Which
Oh,
issue do you think he would want to cover?
he'd love it.
So, Ivan, what do you think about Monel's banishment to the Phantom Zone?
I wonder if I know he hasn't read any Legion of Superhero comics, unless maybe he read some adventure comics or maybe some of that 70s stuff. I don't know.
I don't know. He'd never admit it.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
he's real about some of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, he was always telling us how much he liked like Led Zeppelin stuff.
Right.
Like he's like, if the music that came out when I was whatever in 11th grade, that's the best music. He's
Yeah. I was going to say, like, I read some profile of him. I don't remember what it might have actually been in Schizo or something. And this is long before I met him. And asked what like his favorite music was, and he mentioned like the Magnetic Fields or something, which is fine, but it's like young artsy music, at least at the time. And then when I met him in person, not the first time I met him, but one of the times I think you might have been there too. We were eating or something, and he was talking about Aerosmith. Like, oh, this is the real life.
Wait, are you sure that wasn't me talking about Aerosmith?
No, it was him. He had this theory that you could. What was his theory? It was something about how like different generations like different periods of Aerosmith or something like that. And like,
Is he like the toys in the attic era?
yes, that's what he said. I'm a toys in the attic guy. He said, "How old are you? You probably are really into permanent vacation."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "You can always." I don't even remember how the theory worked. It was totally ridiculous. But
well, yeah, I mean, because they were around so long.
Right.
I got into them with Pump. I really loved Aerosmith for whatever, all through school and stuff.
Did we finish the letters?
Oh
shit.
We're still talking about how Giffen should be able to do whatever he wants.
Giffen should do what he wants.
It evolved into the different eras of Aerosmith.
But he needs to get back to 9 panels.
Yeah.
Some of that, I mean, like I said, he's not a young man. At some point, he's like, fuck this doing 9 panels a page shit. I'm doing 6. What do you think?
He just started doing the grid of 6. He's like,
well, that's what he does now.
Panels.
That's what he does now. It's like 6. He's as rigid with that as he used to be with the 9 panel grid. He does those 6 panel grids. And maybe it's getting harder for him to draw small and see smaller. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Eyesight, but also like it came from that. There was that Kirby phase that he went through,
right?
His second Kirby phase.
And especially if this isn't like your life story the graphic novel that is yours that you've been dreaming of doing. At some point, it's like they're paying me the fucking same no matter what I do. Why am I giving them all this extra story? I'm just making my job harder for myself.
Yeah, but that makes it, I don't know, I wonder if the job somehow did get more difficult for him to perform, like after doing like 7 comic books a month for 20 years or something. Did it actually get more difficult, or is he like, my doctor said I would have a heart attack again if I didn't slow down, or I don't know. So
he's not doing like amphetamines all day long like he might have been doing at the time.
Yeah. Next letter is from David Kaufman, New Orleans, Louisiana. He begins by talking about how it seems like they're beginning to flesh out the the world and the terrain of the 30th century more than they had been. There's a scene in 312 where Gigi Cusimano says a drone has captured a criminal or something. And he says, while I like the idea that drones handle most of the nuisance crimes, good phrase, since robotics is certainly a science fictional theme. And he says, have you been rereading Asimov? And the roboticization of the future is a subject you haven't dealt with yet. I'm not so sure. Levitz has also put out the fact that there's only 100 science police officers on Earth, and that a lot of the work is done by robots.
At this point, society had wisely decided to defund the police, get them down to 100.
David Kaufman says, I'm not so sure limiting the number of science police on Earth to 100 is such a good idea. I know you are trying to get across the idea that law enforcement is very advanced, but the small number seems disproportionate. It also raises the question why the Legion is needed on Earth as much as it is, assuming that the Legion is one of the more powerful groups. What I mean is, stationing 25 Legionnaires on a world that only needs 100 regular policemen also seems disproportionate. I realize that a large number of the Legionnaires are usually out on missions. Still, the proportion of citizens to science police to Legionnaires seems a little skewed. And he also mentions Asimov as sort of a source, maybe, for the idea that there's robots being cops. We were talking about that the other day. You said the Foundations show or the iRobot. We were talking about the Foundation show and the iRobot movie.
Right. I've read all the books. The books, at least, are very good. Yeah, he's talking about drones as well.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Did they exist in any capacity in 1984?
Not like we have them now, but I guess they always called like a little unmanned robot has always been called a drone. Didn't really think of it like that, though.
Does the United Nations have their own force separate from the science police?
Is there United Nations in the future?
Did I say United? I meant United.
Oh, you mean United Planets? Oh,
right. Because, I was meaning to make that connection. I just said it wrong.
Right.
The United Nations has its own military force, or
they have they're the peacekeeping force or something, right? They're the blue helmet guys,
right?
Aren't they?
And isn't Earth has some extra significance in the United Planets? Like, is it the capital, or?
I think so. I think Earth is kind of the, I think even now, or even in 1984, they had made Earth out to be like the seed world for all those other space races.
Right.
And so, yeah, it still holds a special place as the center of the United Planets, even though they've got Weber's world and stuff.
Right. Those 100 science police might only have to cover the non United Planets related parts of the Earth. Seems like a big chunk of it is, but they have like all kinds of different aliens on Earth now, and we're in the 31st century. Like, it's I feel like it's like part of.
Oh, are you trying to say that there's probably other law enforcement all around the world that's not related to the science police?
Like the Vatican or something. Like, there's two governments.
Right.
The Vatican has its own police and stuff like that. So there's there's the rest of the Earth, and then there's like the United Planets part.
Oh, I guess I kind of felt like the whole planet had this United Planets jurisdiction, and maybe there's a handful of science police on every continent of the planet.
Like what do you call this? Like a gigantic embassy.
Mm-hmm.
Like a citywide embassy or something that has jurisdiction outside of Earth jurisdiction, like its own jurisdiction. Yeah,
I think I see what you mean.
I'm getting too out there.
Like you're saying that's where those 100 science police officers operate, is like in Vatican City, but that belongs to Vatican City that belongs to the United Planets.
Right. And why are they the science police? Do they if you try to sneak creationism into your textbook, they come after you? Or that's not science.
I don't know.
What do they do? Where does the science come in?
It's been science police since like the days of Edmund Hamilton or something, right?
Right.
It just sounds futuristic to call them
Teaching at a
science police.
parochial school. Oh shit! Here come the science police.
Hmm. Yeah, they're like the alternative to like the 1 million moms movement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe they just do like science experiments.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have little chemistry sets
Mm-hmm.
on their police desks.
Mm-hmm. I guess they could be anti-science police too. Could go either way, but that would just be the police on Earth anyway.
Right, right. The anti-science. There's like 20 million of those on the planet.
Right.
I wondered if you had something to add about Isaac Asimov since we talked about that and a connection to the Legion. Do you think maybe Paul Levitz was reading Asimov for real, like this guy says he might be? Do you think that Asimov stuff uh, has factored into the comics in any way throughout the series?
I mean, I can see it a little bit in the government stuff. Reminds me a little bit of some of the stuff in the Foundation, but he doesn't seem to be like he's definitely not against like evil killer robots, which Asimov was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see like peripheral similarities, but I wouldn't say like thematically they're very strongly similar. But he also, we can tell he does borrow a lot from popular science fiction anyway. Like he, there's a lot of Douglas Adamsy things peppered in here. I think like even in this issue, there's like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe.
Yeah, it's like Levitz is kind of tuned into the I don't know, like the simplest, shallowest aspects
Right,
of science fiction, like it's
right,
soft sci-fi or whatever, but not
right,
Star Wars.
right.
I
Star
think
Trek.
even Yeah, I think even Kaufman kind of points out that they haven't done a lot with robots. Like maybe that drone police officer is maybe the first time they've really talked about the police using robots or something.
Yeah, the Legion itself has had that dumb rule, like that no robots rule.
Yeah.
Seems pretty limiting.
He goes on to talk a little bit about the relationship, romantic relationship between um, science police officer Gigi Cusimano and Sunboy. He says, "You reinforce my impression that Gigi is a sophomore, both in the science police and as a person. The Greek meaning of the word is wise fool." He thinks that Sunboy is kind of in a predator role, and he's going to use her and drop her. And maybe Cusimano is not aware of that fact.
Right.
Um, I think it turns out that Cusimano is a little bit sharper than this guy gives her credit for,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a whole half issue devoted to she and Colossal Boy and
Right.
one other character kind of sticking it to Sunboy, and they break up. I think something like that.
Right. Right. For a while, I was trying to figure out like how much is Levitz writing Sunboy to be an asshole on purpose, and how much of it is the time. Like maybe it was still like this is the time of like '80s movies where guys are doing like date rapey things, do the whole thing. The heroes of the book of the movies are, but yeah, at some point, I think he is made to look like the jerk, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Expressly,
He really is. Yeah, Paul has written him to be like a real scoundrel
right?
type of character, and I don't know that he is like you say date rapey, but like he's never done
Yeah,
anything like that. But
maybe
he's
I should say creepy. How about creepy?
yeah,
Is
kind
that
of
still
a
too far?
no. That's maybe not far enough. Somewhere between the two, split the difference, I
Right,
guess.
right.
Uh,
Like I don't think he's like a sexual predator or that
right.
he's evil, but he's like a frat boy.
He's like a himbo or something,
Himbo.
maybe.
Yeah.
or yeah, I mean, he just dates around, I
He
guess.
thinks he's a player.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't
He'll
really.
get his in
Yeah,
about
he gets
5 years.
oh well, yeah, in 5 years.
Yeah.
But in the short term, they humiliate him. I think in
Right.
somewhere in issue like 13 or something.
Yeah, he'll burn for all that.
Yeah. Another part I highlighted in Kaufman's letter, he's looking forward to the double format, the Baxter and the Tales Mando format, especially the higher quality of print. Never mind. I don't have anything to say about that. I don't know why I highlighted that. Paul says the issue of the number of science police on Earth versus the number of Legionnaires is an interesting one. That point that he's made.
Mm-hmm.
But consider the fact that the Legion is almost never all active on Earth. There you go.
Yeah.
I don't know what that point of that really was, but
it is interesting. Like, is it because there is less crime in the future, or they're more civilized, or is it because some of it is automated, or
I think
maybe it's all like white collar crime and it's easier to.
Yeah, I kind of got the impression that the violent street level crime, the reason they have 100 science police officers is because there's less crime that they need to handle.
Right.
But yeah, it must be elaborated on in that comic, or it makes you think that they have robots doing a lot of this, a lot of the stuff that your average beat cop would do in the present day.
I wonder how many science police there are 5 years later. Like, it seems like a much rougher world, but maybe they don't have as much. I don't want to get Brawl mixed up with Earth. At some point, Earth starts seeming like a police state, right? When the Dominators are.
Yeah, I think did the United Planets collapse?
I think so.
And if the science police is United Planets law enforcement, then there, I guess, would be fewer science police potentially. But that police state was run by they called it EarthGov, the government of the Earth, independent of the United Planets.
Right.
And so those soldiers, like, they had those guys with the full face mask. They called them bucket heads. I don't know if those guys are science police or not. I can't remember. But there was a lot of them.
I can't remember. And Colossal Boy, isn't he a science police guy?
He is a science police guy. You know what? I think those bucket dudes are science police officers.
Yeah.
But they're working for the Earth government instead of the United Planets government.
All right. I mean, I was just speculating a minute ago. I didn't know for sure who they worked for.
I mean, I thought they must have worked for the United Planets. But I also feel like probably most of this stuff was never really worked out too solidly.
Right.
Before the beer bombs figured it all out.
Right. It would make sense, though, like the difference between a state government and a federal government. Like, there might be separate police, separate officials for the Earth specifically versus United Nations or United Planets.
Yeah, like if you consider that there's how many planets are in the United Planets? Like 100, 1 million,
right?
And like how could you have the police force on one planet be the same outfit as on a planet that's some millions of miles far away? You know, it's kind of
right. Plus,
but they wouldn't have their own
customs, different crimes, right? Yeah, I'm really curious once we dive into the 5 years later stuff, because I think some of it probably accidentally predicts a lot of the things that are happening now. I think there's a fair amount of like nationalism in it, and like, I don't know, racism. I guess it's like speciesism or whatever.
Yeah.
and like just some of the things that are breaking down in this country in the last, 5 to 10 years. I think some of that is implied to have happened in between the 5 years. Like there's what's the other word for nationalism? I'm thinking of something more. It's not somewhere between nationalism and racism.
I don't know.
I don't know. Whatever that word is, there's some of that going on. So, what was your favorite letter?
This one from Jeff is definitely the one that caused the most conversation. Or, like, I mean, it's.
We had some thoughtful questions.
Wait, what were the thoughtful questions?
Some of the things he was talking about evoked, like he was talking about drones and
yeah,
science police and stuff. Like,
yeah, that guy was thoughtful. The guy previous to him,
yeah, he was throwing bombs.
Was a dumb fuck.
Yeah,
but I think that generated the most interesting conversation. Got us really thinking.
Sometimes you need a dumb shit. It's like for entertainment value.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's I'm sure that's why he published that letter. Is because it's very incendiary and obnoxious. But I know I think there's probably a bunch of people who are on board and are agreeing with what Jeff from No Address Given. They identify with him. Even now. I hope they're not watching this.
What's interesting is you see pre-internet, like I feel okay, like that guy, the asshole. It seems like all of the fandom that stands out now is like that, like toxic, right? But I'd be curious, maybe if we could pick the brain of someone who actually edited these. Like, was it always that way? Was it always like 90% assholes? Only back then they were able to curate that stuff out. You know what I mean? And just put the nice letters in. Or did it actually get worse with time?
Yeah, we've talked about that before. I have no idea what it might have been
like. I think I thought maybe we did. It sounded, I was getting deja vu.
And I wonder if anybody's ever asked, like Paul Levitz is answering all of these letters personally.
Yeah.
So I assume he read most of them. I mean, I don't know if Karen Berger is like reading them too. If he's going to do it, she just like here's your bag of mail.
Surely not. Maybe they had to have someone at least whittle them down for him, right?
I don't know. I'd be curious. Like somebody used to ask him that. No one has ever asked him about the letters page. DC doesn't want you to know they ever even were published. They're not on their website. It's really sad to look at that DC online thing, and it's like looking at this issue, for example. You scroll through it. There's no Battle Force 2000 comic. There's no letters page. It's as if it didn't happen. Like there's a lot of information here. A lot of like time capsule type of stuff. A lot of plot detail type of stuff. A lot of fan stuff that is just gone.
Right. Yeah, I mean the whole package. You lose so many of those things when those are stripped out. And I mean the same thing can be said for, the trades or the omnibuses or whatever. Like it's cool to have all these in one book, but it doesn't have the letters columns and like the in-house ads, like where you can this happened during Armageddon 2001. That was coming out around the same time, or you get an idea. It helps. The context helps you, I don't know, understand the story better. Like, this came out during the period that Superman was dead, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm of two minds about that. Like, on one hand, it's like, oh, that's just like nostalgia. Like, why else do you need to know when this came out? It's like, well, I'm not a big history guy. I just want to read this comic book story. But on the other hand, like we read them like we're doing now, and it's like, oh yeah, what month did this come out? What was the other shit that came out?
Right.
And those house ads, the old ones anyway, are beautiful. Like why are you throwing those away? Like I don't know. The other day we looked at the stupid zero hour or the end of an era. Is that what it was called? The
Right.
last, right before the reboot Legion, and it's just like a white box. Like that's stupid.
Right.
I don't need to see that. But
Right.
but yeah, that shit needs to be somewhere.
Right. I've noticed, like, maybe it's because I've read a lot of the same issues my entire life since they've come out. So they don't necessarily feel of a time. Like if I'm reading some of these, it doesn't transport me back to 1984. I don't like hear Van Halen like when I'm reading this because I read it. I read it in 1991, and then I and then I read it again in '96, and then again in 2000. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then you'll run into these ads, and then it will take you to that time. You're like, you see like old Nintendo games, and then it feels very old. In the same way, like you'll watch a movie and it seems fine and timeless, and then they pull out a giant cell phone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah.
Well, I mean, that's probably partly why they don't want you to see that. They don't want you to think this is some old thing.
Right.
They want you to think it's a brand new thing. That's why they recolored all the archive books and stuff like that. Is like they're trying to convince you that this is still fresh when it's actually an artifact. Because people won't accept things as an artifact, but they will accept a new dorky comic book, I guess. I don't know.
Do you think there could be like liability issues with the letters? I understand why the ads probably can't run a lot of times because they belong to the advertisers, but the companies. But like these letters, are they worried that would they have to get sign off with all the people who wrote in to republish them, or?
I have no idea. I've never thought about that. Like, I mean, I could see them maybe wanting to take away their house addresses and stuff.
Right.
But I don't know. Like they're still out there. But like somebody who wrote a letter to Adventure Comics in the '60s when they were a little kid, like,
yeah,
I don't think there's an identity theft potential there.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm sure they don't have to pay royalties. Like, are they paying royalties to the kid who designed the Black Spider-Man costume or the kid who designed the Supergirl costume they used for 10 years? No. So there's obviously a precedent there that they don't have to pay residuals,
Well, except when someone sees something and then they tweet about it and then a big shitstorm comes and it's bad publicity for them, which almost never happens, but corporations do everything preemptively.
It's messed up.
We're a long way from the 31st century.
That's it. That's the letters page, Legion Outpost for Tales of the Legion 317. Good letters, Jeff, Michael Graboy, Dave Kaufman. See you in 30 days. You falling asleep?
I'm not falling asleep. I'm just getting dumber. Sometimes you need a dumb shit for entertainment value.